The Aegean Sea rolls endlessly under the sun, its surface a restless shimmer of blue broken only by the white sails of passing boats. It is the year 1900, and a small crew of sponge divers from the island of Symi is braving the unpredictable waters off the rocky coast of Antikythera, a tiny island between Crete and the Peloponnese. These men are no strangers to risk. They dive deep with little more than heavy helmets and lungfuls of courage, searching for sponges that will fetch a living back home. One diver descends into the deep, fighting the pressure in his ears and the weight of his gear, expecting to find coral and seabed rock. Instead, through the wavering blue haze, he sees something glimmering. Not sponge, not stone, but bronze. The shapes are strange, disordered, scattered like broken bones. He surfaces with news of a wreck. Soon word spreads, and archaeologists are summoned. What they uncover over the coming months is staggering. A Roman-era shipwreck, dating to around 70 to 60 BCE, loaded with treasures meant for the wealthy and powerful. Statues of marble and bronze, amphorae filled with goods, jewellery, coins and fragments of strange machinery unlike anything seen before. Among the corroded mass of bronze, fused and frozen by centuries beneath the sea, lies what will later be called the Antikythera Mechanism. At first, the find draws little attention. It is a lump of bronze, green and brittle, barely recognisable as anything other than scrap. But when conservators begin cleaning it, they see teeth, not human, but mechanical. Tiny interlocking gears emerge from the corrosion, arranged in a complexity no one had expected from the ancient world. The fragments are pieced together, and scholars begin to realise they are looking at the remains of a machine so advanced that it challenges the very timeline of human invention. The Antikythera mechanism is small enough to be held in two hands, housed originally in a wooden case about the size of a shoebox. Inside, over 30 precision bronze gears mesh together with extraordinary accuracy. These gears are not crude, their teeth are finely cut, their ratios carefully calculated. They are the kind of engineering we associate with Renaissance clockmakers, not with craftsmen 2 millennia earlier. As researchers study the mechanism, its purpose becomes clear. It is not a weapon, nor a tool of navigation in the traditional sense. It is a cosmic calculator, a device designed to track the movements of the heavens. By turning a small crank, the gears would rotate and display the positions of the sun, moon, and possibly even the known planets. Dials on the front and back marked the passage of time, predicted lunar and solar eclipses, and tracked the cycles of the ancient Olympic Games. Imagine it, in an age before telescopes, before pendulum clocks, before the very concept of mechanical timekeeping had been born, Greek engineers built a device capable of modelling the universe itself. This was not a simple calendar, but a machine that embodied the mathematics of celestial cycles, translating the abstract dance of the heavens into something tangible, visible, predictable. The very existence of the Antikythera mechanism raises questions. How could such a device have been made with the tools of the time? Where did the knowledge come from? Some point to Hipparchus of Rhodes, the great astronomer of the 2nd century BCE, whose theories of lunar motion seem to be encoded in the gearwork. Others suggest a connection to Archimedes, whose genius for mechanics might have inspired such a creation. Yet no other mechanism like it has been found from the ancient world. There are hints, references in text to devices that modelled the heavens, such as Cicero's mention of a sphere made by Archimedes that could display the motions of the planets. But those descriptions remained words on a page until this corroded box was lifted from the seabed. For centuries, the Antikythera mechanism lay forgotten in museum storage, its significance underestimated. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that X-ray imaging revealed the true complexity of its internal gears, opening a window into its lost genius. More recent high-resolution scans have uncovered inscriptions on its surfaces, tiny Greek letters that act as an instruction manual, describing how to operate the dials and what they represented. The inscriptions confirm what scholars long suspected. This was no mere toy or curiosity. It was a serious scientific instrument, intended to predict eclipses, track celestial cycles, and align human life with the rhythms of the cosmos. It was, in essence, an analog computer, built 2,000 years before anyone thought such machines existed. Standing before the fragments today in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, you can see the green corroded gears, their teeth still sharp despite the centuries. the device feels both impossibly ancient and strangely modern, like something that should not exist where it does in history. How many of these machines were made? Was the Antikythera Mechanism a one-off masterpiece, or one survivor of a tradition of craftsmanship now lost? If there were others, where are they? Did they crumble to dust? Were they melted down for scrap, or are they still waiting beneath the sea, hidden in other wrecks? The Antikythera fragments sit in a glass case in Athens today, inert and silent. But through modern reconstruction, they have begun to speak again. In workshops and labs around the world, teams of historians, mathematicians, and engineers have painstakingly recreated the device, gear by gear, using both ancient techniques and modern imaging. When the crank is turned, the dials begin to move, and the machine comes alive once more. On the front face, a ring of Greek zodiac signs rotates to mark the path of the sun through the year. A smaller dial traces the moon's journey, complete with a mechanism to account for its varying speed, a subtle detail that reveals the hand of a master astronomer. On the back, spiral dials chart the long cycles of eclipses, repeating every 223 lunar months, and the timing of athletic festivals, including the Olympic Games. To hold a reconstruction in your hands is to feel something uncanny. It is like gazing at a Renaissance clock, except it predates them by more than a millennium. It is the past speaking with a fluency we thought it lacked. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to reconsider the capabilities of the Hellenistic world, not just its art and philosophy, but its engineering and applied science. Some scholars argue that this device was not unique, but one of many. Cicero wrote of seeing two devices in Rome, both attributed to Archimedes, that modelled the movements of the heavens. Hero of Alexandria described automata and mechanical wonders that suggest a culture comfortable with gears and precision mechanics. If so, then the Antikythera Mechanism may not be an isolated miracle, but rather the sole surviving witness of a whole tradition of craftsmanship now vanished. But if these devices once existed, why do we have only this fragmentary survivor? The answer may be practical. Bronze was precious, and machines could be melted down for weapons or tools. Wood and other materials would have decayed. Wars, plunder, and the slow grind of centuries erased most traces. The Antikythera Mechanism may simply have been unlucky enough to sink to the seafloor, and lucky enough to be preserved. Others see its uniqueness as evidence of a singular genius at work, perhaps inspired by the great minds of the time. Hipparchus, who lived in Rhodes, is often credited with inventing mathematical models for lunar motion that match the gear ratios found in the mechanism. Some think he himself may have commissioned it. Others suggest it emerged from a workshop connected to the Library of Alexandria, that great storehouse of knowledge that might have held the blueprints of many such marvels, lost in fire and conquest. The implications ripple outward. If the Greeks of the 2nd century BCE could build an analog computer to model the cosmos, what else might they have been capable of that left no trace? It hints at a level of applied science centuries ahead of its time, knowledge that could have transformed the medieval world had it not been lost. The European Renaissance, in this light, looks less like an isolated flowering and more like a recovery, a rediscovery of ideas glimpsed once before then buried by time. Not all agree with the grand claims. Some argue that while the mechanism is remarkable, it may have been a luxury object, made for a wealthy patron more as a display of erudition than as a widely used tool. Its survival, in this reading, is not evidence of a lost tradition, but of a rare curiosity, a technological dead end. And yet, even as a dead end, it testifies to human ingenuity reaching across the ages. Modern CT scans continue to reveal more. Hidden inscriptions on the plates inside describe in detail the cycles of the planets, suggesting that the mechanism was even more advanced than we realized, perhaps tracking Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. If true, the Antikythera Mechanism was not only a lunar-solar calculator, but a full model of the known universe, a handheld orrery built centuries before such things were thought possible. Looking at it now, you can imagine an ancient scholar turning the crank, watching the dials shift, and feeling a profound connection between human reason and the order of the cosmos. The machine was not just practical, it was philosophical. It embodied the belief that the universe could be understood, measured, and predicted, that the heavens ran according to laws that could be captured in gears and ratios. And then, as the ship sank off Antikythera, that knowledge vanished from history only to reappear in fragments. it would be more than 1,000 years before European clockmakers would approach this level of mechanical sophistication. The Antikythera Mechanism stands as both a triumph and a tragedy, a triumph of human thought and a tragedy of lost continuity. It reminds us that progress is not always linear, that knowledge can be forgotten as easily as it's gained. As we leave the quiet museum in Athens, the green fragments glowing softly under the lights, we are left with questions. How many other wonders were lost in the tides of history? What other devices, manuscripts and inventions lie forgotten in shipwrecks or buried beneath ruins? The Antikythera Mechanism is not just a window into the past, it is a mirror, showing us that our ancestors were not so different, their minds as sharp, their curiosity as insatiable. It is a reminder that mystery is often not a lack of knowledge, but a fragment of a greater story still waiting to be uncovered. And with that, we turn next to another enigmatic artifact, simpler in form but just as puzzling, a clay jar that might have harnessed electricity centuries before the modern world. The so-called Baghdad Battery awaits. If you made it this far into the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support really helps keep this going. The Baghdad Battery. The Tigris River winds like a living ribbon through the land of Mesopotamia, the fertile crescent that gave rise to some of humanity's earliest civilizations. Here, among date palms and sun-baked ruins, empires have risen and fallen for more than 5,000 years. The Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians all left their marks on these soils. By the time the Parthians ruled this region, around 2,000 years ago, Mesopotamia was a crossroads of cultures, trade and ideas. It is within this setting that an object of humble appearance, no grand monument, no inscribed tablet, would one day shake assumptions about ancient science. The story begins in 1938, when Wilhelm Koenig, a German archaeologist working in Iraq, was cataloguing artifacts at the Iraq Museum in Baghdad. Among the shelves of pottery and statues, he noticed a small clay jar only about 6 inches tall. At first glance, it looked like countless others, plain and functional. But inside this vessel lay something unusual, a rolled-up copper cylinder, sealed at one end with a disc of copper and bitumen, and within it, an iron rod. The jar's neck was sealed with asphalt, holding the iron rod in place without letting it touch the copper cylinder. To Koenig, the arrangement looked strikingly familiar. He had seen something like it in modern laboratories and textbooks. This was, he thought, a primitive galvanic cell. In other words, a battery. If the jar were filled with a mild acid like vinegar, grape juice or fermented wine, the copper and iron would act as electrodes, producing a small but measurable electric current. The thought was astonishing. If true, it would mean that electricity was not first harnessed in the 18th or 19th century, but in ancient Mesopotamia, more than 1,800 years earlier. The Baghdad Battery, as it would later be called, instantly became one of the most controversial artifacts of the 20th century. Skeptics dismissed Koenig's idea as fanciful, the projection of modern concepts onto ancient objects. Supporters pointed to experiments showing that replicas of the jar could indeed generate about 1 volt of electricity. To this day, the debate has never fully settled. But before we dive into the controversy, let's step back and imagine what this discovery could mean. Picture an artisan in Parthian Mesopotamia. His workshop smells of smoke and heated metal. On a workbench, he places a small clay jar, pours in sour wine, inserts the copper tube and iron rod, then seals the top with asphalt. He touches 2 thin wires to the electrodes, and a spark jumps faintly, or perhaps a tingling sensation can be felt on the skin. To his apprentices, it seems like magic. To him, it is power, a small spark from the gods, captured in human hands. What could such a device be used for? Modern experiments suggest at least 2 possibilities. The first is electroplating, coating a base metal like silver with a thin layer of gold. Artifacts from Mesopotamia and nearby regions sometimes show remarkably thin, and even coatings of precious metals, so fine they would be difficult to achieve by hammering or fire gilding alone. With electricity, however, the process becomes straightforward. Place the object in a solution of gold salts, connect it to the negative terminal of a battery, and the gold ions are deposited onto its surface. If the Baghdad Battery was used this way, it may have served as a craftsman's tool for decorating jewellery or ritual objects, giving them a luxurious sheen without wasting precious resources. The second possibility is healing or ritual use. In the modern era, electrical currents have been used in therapies for pain relief and stimulation of muscles. It is conceivable that ancient healers might have noticed the tingling effects of electricity and applied it in a similar way, perhaps believing it had spiritual or medicinal properties. Imagine a priest touching the charged electrodes to a patient's skin, declaring that divine power was flowing into the body. Of course, these are speculations. No direct evidence survives of wires, plating solutions, or instructions for using the jar as a battery. But the design is difficult to explain away as accidental. The fact that the copper and iron are carefully separated by asphalt, preventing direct contact, suggests intentionality. If the jar had been merely a container, why construct it with such specific features? Skeptics counter with alternative explanations. Some argue the jar may have been used simply to store scrolls or sacred texts, the copper cylinder acting as a protective casing. Others think it could have held papyrus scrolls coated in asphalt to keep them from decaying. These theories avoid the problem of imagining ancient electricity, but struggle to explain why metal components would corrode as if they had been exposed to acidic liquids. When Koenig published his interpretation, it attracted little attention at first. But in the 1940s, as electrical science advanced and replicas of the jar were tested, the idea caught the imagination of the public. Science museums built working versions of the Baghdad Battery, filling them with vinegar or lemon juice to demonstrate the tiny voltages they produced. Suddenly, a simple clay jar became a symbol of the possibility that the ancients knew more than we give them credit for. By the 1970s and 80s, the Baghdad Battery was firmly entrenched in popular imagination, appearing in books, documentaries, and even television shows about ancient mysteries. For many, it joined the ranks of artifacts like the Antikythera Mechanism, objects out of place in their time, whispers of forgotten knowledge. Yet unlike the Antikythera Mechanism, whose function as an astronomical computer is now well established, the Baghdad Battery remains ambiguous. Its simplicity is both its strength and its weakness. It is so easy to see it as a battery because the design is so close to a modern one, yet so little evidence surrounds it that certainty is elusive. Still, the jar sparks a profound question. What if electricity was known in some form in the ancient world? Not as a widespread technology, but as a curiosity, a tool, a ritual aid. What if artisans and priests experimented with sparks and tingling shocks, without ever developing the broader science of electromagnetism? It would not be the first time in history that knowledge flickered into existence, only to fade before it could catch fire. Standing in the Iraq Museum before the original jar, you might not feel the weight of history that the pyramids or ziggurats inspire. It is small, humble, unadorned, yet within its corroded copper and asphalt seal lies the possibility of a story that rewrites our assumptions about the past. Part 1 closes here, with Koenig's realization and the first sparks of controversy. In Part 2 we will follow the debate forward, into modern experiments, the broader context of ancient science, and the tantalizing hints that the Baghdad Battery may not be an isolated invention at all, but part of a hidden tradition of technologies lost to time. The Baghdad Battery sits quietly in its glass case today, unassuming, just another artifact among thousands in the Iraq Museum. But its story is anything but ordinary. Since Koenig first proposed its identity as an ancient battery, scientists, engineers, and enthusiasts have tried to put the theory to the test. In laboratories across the world, researchers have built replicas of the clay jar. The construction is simple: a ceramic vessel, a rolled copper sheet forming a cylinder, a sealed iron rod, and an asphalt plug. Fill it with vinegar, lemon juice, or grape juice, and connect the copper and iron to wires. A voltmeter needle twitches, and a faint but undeniable current flows. The output is small, less than a modern AA battery, but real nonetheless. When several replicas are linked in series, the voltage adds up. A string of such jars can produce enough current to deliver a tingling shock when touched, or to electroplate a coin with a thin film of metal. In museum demonstrations, visitors have watched plain metal objects emerge with a golden shine after being exposed to the tiny current from recreated Baghdad batteries. The effect is subtle, but undeniable. Does this prove the ancient device was used that way? Not necessarily. Experiments show it could work, but history is not written in hypotheticals. What's missing is context. Wires, instructions, or artifacts clearly showing evidence of plating by electrolysis. Without that, skeptics argue, we're overlaying our knowledge onto something that may have had an entirely different purpose. Still, the debate remains lively. Some historians believe the Parthians, or their neighbours, stumbled across electricity accidentally, perhaps by curiosity or experimentation. A craftsman might have noticed that a copper and iron arrangement in vinegar produced strange effects: bubbles, sparks, tingling. Over time, this could have led to practical uses. Others suspect that the jar was not Parthian at all, but possibly from the Sasanian period or even later, pushing its date closer to the Middle Ages. The biggest question is not whether the jar could function as a battery, but whether it was intended to. Could such knowledge have been passed down quietly, used by artisans or priests without ever spreading into general science? It is possible. History is full of lost threads, technologies discovered once then forgotten for centuries. Take, for example, Roman concrete. The recipe that allowed aqueducts and harbours to endure for millennia was lost in the Middle Ages and only rediscovered recently. Or consider Greek fire, a Byzantine weapon that no modern chemist can replicate with certainty. If such knowledge could vanish, why not the controlled use of electricity? There are even tantalising parallels in other cultures. In ancient Egypt, reliefs in the temple of Hathor at Dendera show what some claim resemble large bulb-like shapes connected by cables. Most Egyptologists dismiss this interpretation, seeing instead lotus flowers and mythological symbols. But the similarity is enough to fuel speculation that electricity, in some form, was known far beyond Mesopotamia. The Baghdad Battery also connects, in the minds of many, with the Antikythera Mechanism. Both are examples of technology seemingly out of place in their time. One models the heavens with precision gears, the other may capture electrical energy in clay. Together they suggest that ancient science was not always linear, not always primitive compared to our expectations. Instead, it may have surged in bursts of brilliance, flaring and fading as empires rose and fell. But there is also a caution here. The Baghdad Battery reminds us how fragile history is. The object might have vanished into obscurity if Koenig had not recognised its potential. During the Iraq War, the museum that housed it was looted, and many artefacts disappeared into black markets. For a time, its fate was uncertain. That the jar survives at all is almost miraculous. How many other objects like it were lost to time, melted down, or broken, leaving no trace? Modern imaging techniques such as CT scans have not yet revealed hidden inscriptions or design features within the Baghdad Battery. Unlike the Antikythera Mechanism, it carries no engraved instructions, no mathematical precision in its ratios. Its mystery lies in its simplicity, in the gap between what it could do and what we know was done with it. And so, it remains suspended between possibilities. Was it a container for sacred scrolls, its copper protecting fragile papyrus from decay? Was it a curiosity of a tinkerer, never widely used? Or was it, as Koenig believed, an ancient key to harnessing the invisible force of electricity? Whatever the answer, the Baghdad Battery has already served a purpose in our own time. It has reminded us not to underestimate the ingenuity of our ancestors, not to assume that the past was simple, merely because it is distant. It sparks curiosity, fitting for a device that may once have literally sparked in the hands of a craftsman or priest. As you leave the museum, the jar still sits in its case, silent, offering no answers. But it raises a question that echoes through all of history. How much have we forgotten? What knowledge once common could have slipped away, waiting for chance discoveries to remind us of its existence? And with that, we close the story of the Baghdad Battery, a humble clay jar that may or may not have carried the spark of electricity into the ancient world. Our journey forward will take us from Mesopotamia across the seas to stonework in the Andes so precise that even today, blades cannot fit between its blocks. Ahead lies the enigma of Puma Punku, where stones heavier than modern cranes could lift were shaped and moved with a skill that defies explanation. The Puma Punku. The wind whistles thin and sharp across the Bolivian Altiplano, carrying with it the cold breath of the Andes. At nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, the air is thin, and the horizon stretches in endless blue-grey plains broken only by the snow-capped peaks in the distance. Here, near the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, lies a site unlike any other, a scattering of megaliths, shattered and tumbled, that seems less like the work of human hands than the aftermath of a giant's quarry. This place is called Puma Punku, the door of the puma. To approach Puma Punku is to enter a landscape of paradox. The stones that lie across its ruins are among the largest ever used in construction in the ancient world, rivaling those of the Egyptian pyramids. Some weigh more than 100 tons, and yet they were somehow transported across rough terrain, without wheels, without beasts of burden strong enough for such loads. Others are smaller but cut with such precision that their edges are still sharp after centuries of exposure. They are not rough blocks. They are crafted into interlocking H-shaped forms, grooves and channels, as if machined by tools that should not have existed in the pre-Columbian Andes. Archaeologists place the origins of Puma Punku within the broader site of Tiwanaku, a great city that flourished between 500 and 1000 CE, long before the rise of the Inca. Tiwanaku was a ceremonial centre, its pyramids, plazas and monoliths, drawing pilgrims from across the highlands. Puma Punku was its most mysterious precinct, perhaps the heart of its rituals. The name suggests an entrance, a gateway, perhaps into a sacred space, but the gateway lies shattered. Today, the blocks are scattered across the plateau, as though toppled by an earthquake or some other cataclysm. Some are half buried, others lie tilted, and still others remain aligned in fragments of walls. Walking among them, you can run your fingers along grooves that seem as if cut by saws, edges that meet at perfect right angles, surfaces as flat as polished stone. Yet these stones were carved from andesite and red sandstone, materials so hard that modern stonemasons must use diamond-tipped tools to cut them. How were the Tiwanaku builders able to achieve such precision? Conventional explanations suggest they used pounding stones of harder material, patience and skill honed over generations. But skeptics note the uniformity of the cuts, the sharpness of the angles, the near-machined appearance. It is one thing to split a block, it is another to carve a precise channel through it, or to shape an interlocking modular form repeated across multiple blocks. Transport poses another puzzle. The largest stones at Puma Punku are believed to have been quarried miles away, some across Lake Titicaca itself. How were they moved? Without wheels, without draft animals stronger than llamas, without iron tools, the feat seems daunting. Theories abound. Sledges pulled by hundreds of workers, ropes, and ramps. Or, as some more speculative minds suggest, methods we do not yet understand. For the Tiwanaku people, Puma Punku was no ordinary construction. Legends of the Andes speak of gods descending to this place, of the creator deity Viracocha bringing humanity forth from the waters of Lake Titicaca. To the local Aymara, the stones were sacred, their placement deliberate, their form meaningful. The H-shaped blocks may have locked together as part of a vast platform, their interlocking design resisting earthquakes in this seismically active region. The channels may have served to guide water, turning the structure into a place of ritual flow, where water mirrored the heavens above. Yet, as with so many ancient sites, much has been lost. The Spanish chroniclers who came in the 16th century described Tiwanaku as already in ruins, its great stones scattered, its meaning forgotten by those who lived nearby. They marvelled at its scale and wondered who could have built it. Some believed it was the work of giants, others of a lost race. In the centuries since, the same questions echo. Modern archaeology anchors Puma Punku in the Tiwanaku culture, but the exact methods remain debated. No written records survive to describe how the site was built. Radiocarbon dating offers only ranges of use, not construction dates. Some fringe theories place it far older, suggesting it predates known Andean civilizations, or that it was built upon the remnants of something even more ancient. Standing on the plateau, the thin air burning your lungs, it is easy to see why the imagination runs wild here. The stones feel out of place, as if part of a dismantled machine rather than a temple. They lie silent, heavy, waiting for answers that may never come. The winds sweep across the Altiplano with an unbroken force, whispering through the cracks of the great blocks of Puma Punku. For centuries they have lain scattered across the Bolivian plateau, their purpose obscured, their origins contested. Where Part 1 explored the scale and precision of these stones, Part 2 enters the world of theories, how they were built, why they were shattered, and what they might still be hiding. The most accepted explanation among archaeologists is that the builders of Tiwanaku achieved their feats through patient ingenuity and communal labour. Stones may have been shaped by pounding with harder tools like hammerstones of dolerite and polished with sand abrasives. The interlocking H blocks in this view were designed as earthquake-resistant masonry. allowing walls to flex and absorb shocks rather than crumble. Transport, while difficult, could have been accomplished with sledges, ramps, and sheer manpower. But even within conventional theories, questions linger. The uniformity of the H-blocks suggests mass production, each one fitting with another like pieces of a modular system. Were they prefabricated at quarries and transported as finished units, or carved on site? The precision of their right angles is striking, measured in modern surveys within fractions of a degree. To achieve such accuracy without metal chisels seems extraordinary. Then there are the alternative theories, the ones that push Puma Punku beyond the boundaries of orthodox history. Some suggest that the blocks were not carved at all, but cast using a lost form of geopolymer concrete. According to this hypothesis, the builders may have mixed local materials into a stone-like slurry and poured it into moulds, allowing them to create perfect angles, grooves and channels. Though mainstream archaeologists remain sceptical, the idea lingers, supported by the strange uniformity of some block features. Others see the precision as evidence of lost technology, advanced tools that the Tiwanaku people somehow possessed and later lost. In the imaginations of some, these tools were not even human, but gifts of gods or visitors from beyond. To believers in such ideas, Puma Punku is not just a ruin, but a message, a demonstration of power intended to endure the ages. The mystery deepens when we ask how the site came to ruin. The blocks lie toppled and scattered as if struck by a cataclysm. Some believe an earthquake shattered the complex, others that floods from Lake Titicaca swamped it. Local legends tell of a sudden destruction, linking it to the wrath of gods. Whatever the cause, the site was abandoned, and the knowledge of its builders faded into silence. Yet Puma Punku is not only about mystery, it is also about continuity. For the Aymara people, who still live in the Andes today, the site remains sacred. Rituals are still held there, linking modern life with ancient reverence. To them, the stones are not puzzles to be solved, but connections to ancestors and deities, to the world above and the world below. The enigma of Puma Punku also speaks to a larger truth about ancient civilizations. Their achievements often exceed our assumptions. When we underestimate the capabilities of the past, we blind ourselves to their true ingenuity. Whether carved with hammerstones, poured from moulds, or shaped with tools we do not yet understand, the fact remains. Puma Punku was built by human hands, guided by vision and determination. As the sun sets behind the Andes, casting long shadows across the H-blocks, the site takes on an otherworldly glow. The scattered stones resemble pieces of a puzzle, waiting for assembly. Some visitors feel awe, others a quiet unease. The air is thin, the silence profound, broken only by the cries of distant birds. Puma Punku does not yield its secrets easily. It challenges us with questions about technology, about human ambition, about how much of the past has been forgotten. In the end, it stands not just as a ruin, but as a reminder. History is not a straight line, but a tapestry of brilliance, collapse, and rediscovery. And so, with Puma Punku's stones echoing in our minds, we journey next to another mystery carved in stone, the colossal heads of the Olmec civilization, giants of basalt that gaze silently across the jungles of Mesoamerica, their faces frozen in expressions of power and enigma. The Olmec colossal heads. The jungles of southern Mexico are heavy with heat, the air damp and alive with the hum of insects. In the swamps and forests of Veracruz and Tabasco, archaeologists hacking through the undergrowth in the 19th century stumbled upon something extraordinary. Rising from the earth, half buried in vines and roots, were enormous stone faces, heads taller than a man, carved with features so lifelike that even through the centuries of erosion, their expressions still carried weight and personality. These are the Olmec colossal heads, some of the most enigmatic monuments of the ancient world. There are 17 known today, each carved from massive blocks of basalt, some weighing as much as 50 tons. Their dimensions vary, but all are monumental, standing between 5 and 12 feet tall. Each depicts a human face, broad and fleshed, with strong jaws, flat noses, and full lips. Their helmets, adorned with straps and bands, suggest warriors, rulers, or ball players, though no one is certain. The Olmec civilization, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, flourished between roughly 1500 and 400 BCE, long before the Maya and Aztec. They lived in complex societies, building ceremonial centers, practicing ritual bull games, and leaving behind a symbolic art style that would influence all later cultures of the region. Yet the colossal heads are their most famous legacy, their silent faces gazing across time. What strikes the viewer first is the individuality of the heads. No two are alike. Each face has distinct features, different shapes of eyes, lips, cheekbones, even expressions. Some appear stern, others calm, others almost contemplative. Many scholars believe they represent specific rulers, immortalized in stone as a declaration of power and permanence. In this sense, they are not unlike the statues of pharaohs in Egypt, or the busts of Roman emperors. But the mystery deepens when we ask how they were made. The basalt used for most of the heads was quarried miles away, in the volcanic hills of the Tuxtla Mountains. Moving stones of such size across rivers and swamps would have been a feat of extraordinary labour. Without wheels, draft animals, or iron tools, how did the Olmec transport and carve them? The most likely answer is sheer human determination. Hundreds of workers hauling the stones with ropes, sledges and rafts, carving them with stone tools and abrasives. But to stand before one of these heads and contemplate its mass, the explanation feels almost too simple. There is also the matter of their helmets. The bands and straps carved into the stone suggest protective headgear. Some scholars link this to the Mesoamerican bull game, a ritual sport with religious significance. Others see it as a warrior's helmet, marking the subjects as leaders of armies. Still others suggest it is purely ceremonial, a symbol of rulership and divine authority. And then there are the more speculative theories. Some fringe interpretations have claimed that the heads show African features, suggesting contact across oceans long before Columbus. While mainstream archaeology holds that the Olmec were a local culture with no such contact, the lifelike individuality of the heads continues to invite interpretations that challenge conventional timelines. What we know for certain is that the colossal heads were central to Olmec culture. They were placed in ceremonial centres, facing plazas and public spaces where they would have been seen by all. Imagine a crowd gathered under the sun, musicians playing, priests chanting, and before them these monumental faces gazing down, embodying the presence of rulers long gone but still watching, still commanding respect. When the Olmec civilization declined, their cities abandoned, the colossal heads remained. Over time, jungles grew around them, rivers shifted, and soil swallowed their bases. To local peoples, they may have become part of the landscape, half-buried guardians whose origins were forgotten. When rediscovered centuries later, they carried the same aura of awe, as though they had been waiting all along. Standing before an Olmec colossal head is like meeting a presence from another age. The sheer size commands respect, but it is the expressions that unsettle. They are not abstract, not anonymous. They are faces, and they look back at you. Unlike stylized masks or idealized statues, the heads have a realism that suggests memory, an attempt to preserve individuals across time. Archaeologists believe the colossal heads were carved to represent rulers, kings or chiefs whose authority extended across Olmec society. In this interpretation, each head was a political statement. To transport and shape a 40-ton boulder into the likeness of a leader was not merely an artistic act, but a demonstration of power. It proclaimed, "This is who rules, and his likeness is carved in stone so that all may remember." The individuality of the heads supports this theory. Subtle differences in the shape of the eyes, the curve of the lips, even the expression of pride or contemplation, suggest portraiture. It is possible that the Olmec created a new head for each generation of rulers, displaying them in plazas where they became part of ceremonial life. The heads, in this sense, were not art objects, but anchors of identity, binding community to leadership. The helmets carved into each head may reinforce this. The straps and bands could signify elite regalia, protective gear worn in battle, or equipment for the ritual bull game that carried deep symbolic meaning in Mesoamerica. The bull game was more than sport. It was a ritual drama tied to cycles of life, death, and cosmic renewal. To depict a ruler with bull game headgear was to link his authority to the sacred order of the cosmos. Yet the heads also carry mysteries. Why did the Olmec choose to sculpt only the heads, not the full bodies? One theory is that the head alone was seen as the seat of power and identity, sufficient to embody rulership. Another is that the heads may once have been attached to bodies, long since destroyed or lost, though no evidence supports this. the choice remains enigmatic. The technical achievement is equally remarkable. With only stone tools, the Olmec shaped basalt into smooth curves and sharp details. Traces of hammering are visible under magnification, but the overall effect is seamless. To carve even one head would have required months, if not years, of labour, overseen by skilled artisans. The effort speaks to a highly organised society capable of mobilising resources and labour for monumental projects. Speculative theories continue to swirl. Some claim the heads suggest contact with Africa due to their facial features, but this interpretation is rejected by mainstream scholars, who see the heads as distinctly Mesoamerican in style. Others propose that the helmets represent advanced technology, though no supporting evidence exists. As with so many ancient artifacts, the heads are mirrors of our own imagination, reflecting both evidence and projection. What is clear is that the Olmec colossal heads left a profound legacy. The cultures that followed, the Maya, the Zapotec, the Aztec, all inherited elements of Olmec religion, art, and social organisation. The idea of monumental portraiture, of linking rulership to divine authority, persisted throughout Mesoamerican history. The colossal heads are not isolated anomalies. They are the first great expression of a cultural pattern that would shape a continent for centuries. Today, the heads stand in museums and plazas, carefully preserved, their features still striking. For the descendants of the Olmec, and for all who gaze upon them, they remain powerful symbols. They remind us that leadership, memory, and identity were as important to ancient peoples as they are to us. They remind us that art is not only beauty, but power made visible. As the sun sets over La Venta, San Lorenzo, and Tres Zapotes, the great Olmec centres, you can imagine the colossal heads standing in rows, their faces catching the last light, their presence marking the rhythm of generations. Silent, immovable, they embody both the grandeur and the mystery of a civilization that laid the foundations of Mesoamerica, and then faded into the jungle. With the colossal heads watching silently behind us, we turn now to another mystery of the ancient Americas, one carved not in portraiture, but into the very ground itself. Across the desert plains of southern Peru stretch immense geoglyphs, lines and figures so vast they can only be fully seen from the sky. Next, we enter the enigma of the Nazca lines. The Nazca lines, stretching across the arid plains of southern Peru, where the desert meets the foothills of the Andes, lies one of humanity's most perplexing works of art. The sun beats down mercilessly on this landscape, the soil dry and lifeless, and yet inscribed upon it are patterns so immense they cannot be fully seen from the ground. Only from the air do they reveal themselves, vast geoglyphs of animals, plants, spirals, trapezoids, and straight lines stretching for miles. These are the Nazca lines, an ancient mystery etched into the earth. Discovered by the modern world in the early 20th century when pilots first flew over the region, the Nazca lines have since fascinated archaeologists, historians, and dreamers alike. There are hundreds of them, ranging from simple straight paths to elaborate figures of hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, and even humanoid shapes. Some are over 1,000 feet long, drawn with a precision that defies their scale. The Nazca people, who flourished between 200 BCE and 600 CE, are credited with creating these geoglyphs. Their culture thrived in one of the driest regions on Earth, surviving through ingenious irrigation systems and agricultural techniques. Yet the purpose of the lines remains a subject of debate. Were they religious offerings, astronomical markers, or something else entirely? At ground level, the lines are subtle, shallow trenches scraped into the desert surface by removing the dark, sun-baked stones to reveal the lighter soil beneath. The aridity of the desert has preserved them for centuries, preventing erosion. Standing within one, you see only a narrow path stretching away, but from above the patterns become breathtakingly clear. A hummingbird poised mid-flight, a monkey with a curling tail, a spider with long, delicate legs. The scale suggests intention beyond decoration. These figures could never have been fully seen by those who made them, not without vantage points or aerial perspective. Why, then, did the Nazca create them? One theory holds that the lines were offerings to the gods visible from the heavens. The Nazca depended on water in a region where rainfall was scarce. Perhaps they carved prayers into the earth, hoping the sky gods would see and bless them with rain. In this interpretation, the animal figures are symbolic. The spider linked to fertility, the hummingbird to abundance, the monkey to renewal. Another theory connects the lines to astronomy. Some researchers have suggested that the straight lines align with the solstices or the rising of specific stars, serving as a kind of calendar. Others propose they were ritual pathways, walked in processions by worshippers during ceremonies, tracing sacred shapes with their footsteps. There are also more speculative ideas. Because the figures are best seen from above, some have argued they were intended for aerial observation, fueling theories of ancient flight or even extraterrestrial visitors. While such ideas capture the imagination, most scholars prefer explanations rooted in ritual and symbolism, yet the mystery persists. Why such scale? Why such precision? And why such endurance? Walking across the desert at midday, the heat shimmering, you might feel the weight of silence. There are no rivers here, no trees, only vast openness. To carve the earth with patterns so immense, to dedicate such effort to symbols never meant to be seen by human eyes, suggests a culture whose connection to the cosmos was profound. For the Nazca, the desert itself became a canvas, one big enough to speak directly to the gods. From the air, the Nazca Desert looks like a giant scroll, unrolled across the earth. Etched upon it are straight lines running for miles, geometric shapes stretching across plains, and the famous animal figures whose outlines remain sharp despite centuries of wind and sun. The silence of the desert is broken only by the wind, and in that silence, the lines speak of a people whose imagination reached skyward. The central mystery of the Nazca lines is their purpose. Why would the Nazca, living in one of the driest landscapes on Earth, dedicate so much energy to crafting symbols that could not be fully seen from the ground? To answer this, archaeologists have studied their culture, their rituals, and the harsh environment that shaped them. One compelling theory connects the lines to water. The Nazca depended on underground aquifers and seasonal rivers for survival. Archaeological evidence shows that many of their rituals revolved around fertility and rain. Some geoglyphs appear to align with water sources, leading scholars to propose that the lines were part of a vast ritual landscape, prayers etched in the desert to beckon the life-giving rains. The animals themselves may reflect this. The spider as a symbol of fertility, the hummingbird as a messenger of the wet season, the monkey as a symbol tied to the Amazon, where water was abundant. Another interpretation is ritual processions. Some lines are broad enough to walk upon, and where patterns suggest they were pathways. Pilgrims may have traced these routes during ceremonies, moving along the desert floor in symbolic journeys, guided by priests. To walk a line was not to see it, but to participate in the ritual act of creating meaning, becoming part of a cosmic order that extended beyond the human scale. Astronomy has also been considered. Some researchers argue that the lines align with the rising and setting of the sun, moon, or certain stars at solstices and equinoxes. If true, they may have functioned as a calendar, helping the Nazca predict seasonal changes essential for agriculture. Yet the sheer number of lines makes such alignments difficult to prove. Almost any direction finds a celestial match. Still, the idea that the lines connected Earth and sky resonates deeply with their scale. And then there are the more imaginative theories. Some suggest the Nazca possessed hot air balloons or kites that allowed them to see their designs from above. Others go further, proposing extraterrestrial visitors who demanded vast landing markers. While most scholars dismiss such notions, they reveal the awe the lines inspire, work so vast and precise that we instinctively search for extraordinary explanations. Today, the Nazca lines face challenges their creators could not have imagined. Highways cut across them, urban expansion threatens them, and tourists eager to walk their paths risk damaging their fragile outlines. Conservation efforts are underway, but the lines are vulnerable. Ironically, the same dry desert that preserved them for 2 millennia is now endangered by climate change and modern intrusion. What endures is their mystery and their beauty. Flying over the desert, you see the hummingbird stretched in perfect proportion, wings outstretched as if frozen mid-flight. The monkey curls its tail into a spiral, a gesture both playful and cosmic. The spider stretches its legs across the earth, delicate and precise. These are not random designs. They are intentional, powerful symbols, etched for gods or for the cosmos itself. The Nazca lines remind us that ancient people did not merely live on the earth. They sought to inscribe their hopes and fears upon it. The desert became their sacred canvas, a a place where the human urge to communicate with the divine reached monumental scale. Whether as prayers for water, maps of the stars, or pathways for ritual journeys, the lines are testament to a vision of life that embraced the sky, the soil, and everything in between. As the plane circles back toward the mountains, the figures fade into the horizon, swallowed again by the desert. They wait in silence, as they have for centuries, their meaning locked in the past but their wonder alive in the present. With the Nazca lines behind us, we move next to another riddle, this time not etched into the desert, but hidden beneath the earth. In the Indus Valley, the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro whisper of a civilization so advanced it seems almost modern, a city of grids, drains and mystery, still holding secrets after 4,000 years, the city of Mohenjo-Daro. The story of Mohenjo-Daro begins not in its own age, but in ours. In the 1920s, British and Indian archaeologists digging along the Indus River plains began to uncover something unexpected. Not scattered relics of villages, but the buried remains of an ancient metropolis. They found straight streets, brick walls, and a complex so well laid out that it shocked even seasoned excavators. At first, they thought they had discovered something from a late period, perhaps linked to known empires. But as the dust cleared, the truth emerged. These ruins belonged to a civilization older than Greece, older than Rome, and even older than the pyramids of Egypt. This was Mohenjo-Daro, one of the principal cities of the Indus Valley civilization, flourishing between 2500 and 1900 BCE. Along with Harappa and dozens of other urban centres spread across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, Mohenjo-Daro formed part of a cultural world that stretched over 500,000 square kilometres, making it one of the largest and most sophisticated civilizations of the ancient world. And yet, unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Indus left no easily decipherable written histories. What we know of them comes almost entirely from the silent language of their ruins. Imagine walking through the city at its height. From a distance, the city rises out of the flat plain, its baked brick walls glowing red in the sun. The layout is startling. The city is built on a grid plan, with streets intersecting at right angles, dividing the city into blocks. This is not organic growth, but deliberate design. Archaeologists believe the entire city was carefully planned before construction, perhaps rebuilt multiple times on a raised mound to protect against flooding. The streets themselves were wide enough for carts and animals, while narrow lanes cut between the residential blocks. The uniformity of the brickwork is striking. Each brick measures roughly the same dimensions, suggesting standardized production. This kind of uniformity implies strong civic organization, even if no monumental palace announces who commanded it. In the residential areas, houses reveal a society both practical and advanced. Many had multiple rooms, some 2 stories tall, built around open courtyards that allowed air and light to flow. Staircases connected levels, and some homes included private wells for fresh water. Others had bathing areas with carefully laid brick floors, sloped so that water would drain into covered sewers running beneath the streets. This level of sanitation is unmatched for its time. No other Bronze Age civilization built such widespread plumbing systems for both private and public use. The drainage system is perhaps the most astonishing feature. Each household had channels to carry wastewater away, funneled into larger street drains made of brick and covered with stone slabs. These in turn emptied into major sewer lines. Small access points like manholes allowed for cleaning and maintenance. In essence, Mohenjo-Daro had working sanitation and sewerage more than 4,000 years ago, a level of civic infrastructure that wouldn't be equalled in many places until the 19th century CE. The centrepiece of the city, however, was the Great Bath. Rectangular, about 39 feet long and 23 feet wide, with steps leading down into its depths, the pool was lined with tightly fitted bricks sealed with bitumen. Around it were small rooms, possibly for changing or ritual preparation. Archaeologists believe it served as a sacred space for ritual bathing, a precursor to traditions of purification still central in South Asia today. The Great Bath speaks of a culture in which water was not only essential for life, but also imbued with religious and symbolic meaning. Yet, despite the grandeur of its planning, Mohenjo-Daro is curiously quiet about its rulers. Unlike Egypt with its pharaohs or Mesopotamia with its ziggurats and kings, the city lacks monumental palaces or temples. Statues and inscriptions of leaders are absent. this absence raises questions. Was power more diffuse here, spread across councils or local governance, rather than concentrated in a single figure? Was Mohenjo-Daro an egalitarian society, or do we simply lack the evidence to see its hierarchy? Artifacts found at the site offer tantalizing glimpses into daily life. Small carved seals, often made of steatite, depict animals, humans, and mysterious symbols. These seals may have been used for trade, stamped into clay to mark ownership or contracts. The symbols form a script, but it remains undeciphered, one of the great linguistic mysteries of archaeology. Without their words, the people of Mohenjo-Daro remain silent to us, their thoughts and names lost. Other artifacts include terracotta figurines, jewellery of beads and gold, and tools of copper and bronze. They traded widely. Evidence shows contact with Mesopotamia, exchanging goods such as carnelian, lapis lazuli, and cotton textiles. This was not an isolated city, but part of a far-reaching network of commerce and culture. Walking through the ruins, you might stop in one of the residential courtyards. Imagine a family gathering there in the evening, children playing, a pot of grain cooking, the smell of baked bread rising. In another house, a craftsman chips away at a seal, inscribing symbols that may represent a name, a prayer, or a contract. Outside, a procession winds toward the Great Bath, priests leading chants as the community joins in ritual purification. For all its sophistication, Mohenjo-Daro was not merely bricks and drains. It was alive, filled with the rhythms of human existence. And yet, there is an eerie quality to the site today. Excavations uncovered skeletons lying in streets and houses, sometimes in strange positions, as though struck suddenly by catastrophe. Theories abound: floods, earthquakes, epidemics, or invasions. Some fringe writers once claimed nuclear-like destruction, pointing to skeletal remains with signs of heat damage, though these interpretations lack mainstream support. Still, the sudden abandonment remains puzzling. A thriving city, with advanced planning and sanitation, left to crumble and sink beneath the dust. When you walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro today, you see bricks and dust, walls rising knee-high or shoulder-high, streets stretching straight but empty. Yet when this city was alive, it must have been a place of noise and movement, merchants shouting prices, carts creaking on wheels, the splash of water drawn from wells, the laughter of children echoing down lanes. The silence now is profound because it is the silence of lost voices. We see the infrastructure, the skeleton of the city, but not the people. Who were they? How did they live, and why did they leave? The first great mystery lies in who ruled Mohenjo-Daro. In other civilizations of the Bronze Age, rulers carved their names into monuments, raised statues in their likeness, and left inscriptions boasting of victories and divine favour. Here, nothing of the sort remains. No palaces dominate the cityscape, no pyramids or ziggurats cast shadows over the people. Instead, Mohenjo-Daro is filled with practical architecture: homes, drains, workshops, wells, and communal structures. Some scholars suggest this indicates a society without kings, one ruled by councils or collective governance. The uniformity of the bricks and the city's precise planning suggests centralized control, but of a different sort, one based on civic administration rather than divine kingship. If true, this would make the Indus Valley civilization unique among early complex societies, a civilization without visible kings, priests or warriors commanding the narrative. But perhaps the evidence is simply missing. Wooden structures, cloth banners, or less durable materials could have carried the symbols of authority, long since lost to time. Or perhaps power was more discreet, woven into the fabric of trade and ritual rather than displayed in monuments. This absence challenges us, because it resists the narratives we expect, that greatness must always come with crowns and palaces. The second mystery lies in their language. Thousands of seals carved from steatite bear short inscriptions of strange symbols, tiny animals, human-like figures, geometric shapes. These inscriptions are tantalizing, perhaps names, perhaps prayers, perhaps records of trade, but no one has yet deciphered them. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which had the Rosetta Stone as a key, the Indus script has no bilingual text to guide interpretation. The longest known inscription is only about 26 symbols long, too short to confirm whether it was a full language or a symbolic system. For decades, scholars have debated whether the script encodes a language related to early Dravidian, to Proto-Sanskrit, or to something else entirely. Each interpretation carries profound implications. If Dravidian, then the Indus Valley civilization connects directly to modern South Indian languages. If something else, then a whole linguistic branch has been lost to time. Every seal whispers of meaning, but the whispers remain unintelligible, like a radio signal from another age, strong but scrambled. The third mystery concerns their religion and worldview. Without texts, we must piece together beliefs from artifacts and structures. The Great Bath suggests ritual purification, a practice that resonates with later traditions of Hinduism, where water is sacred and bathing is an act of spiritual renewal. Terracotta figurines, often of female forms with elaborate headdresses, may represent fertility goddesses, echoing themes seen across early agrarian societies. One famous seal shows a figure seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals, wearing what appears to be a horned headdress. Some scholars call this the Proto-Shiva figure, linking it to the later Hindu god Shiva as lord of beasts and ascetics. Others caution against projecting modern religions backward, reminding us that our interpretations may say more about us than about them. Still, the imagery suggests a complex spiritual life, tied to fertility, water, and the cycles of nature. Daily life in Mohenjo-Daro must have been vibrant. Excavations have revealed toys, small carts, clay animals, dice, suggesting children played much as they do today. Beads of carnelian and lapis lazuli show a taste for adornment, as well as long-distance trade connections. In workshops, craftsmen drilled beads with astonishing precision, their tools leaving marks so fine that even modern jewellers have marvelled at them. This was a culture that valued both utility and beauty, blending practicality with artistry. And then, there is the question of how it ended. Around 1900 BCE, Mohenjo-Daro began to decline. The drains clogged, houses were abandoned, and the city slowly emptied. Theories abound. Some suggest that climate change altered the course of the Indus River, drying fields and collapsing the agricultural base. Others argue that floods, earthquakes, or epidemics destabilized the population. Invasions by outside groups such as Indo-Aryans were once proposed, but archaeological evidence for mass violence is weak. In truth, the decline of Mohenjo-Daro may have been gradual, not catastrophic. A perfect storm of shifting rivers, changing climate, and economic stress could have eroded the city's lifeblood over generations. People may have left slowly, drifting away to other settlements, until only ruins remained. Yet the image of skeletons found lying in streets, of sudden abandonment, still haunts the imagination. Modern challenges now press upon the ruins. Mohenjo-Daro sits in a floodplain, and seasonal rains threaten to erode its ancient bricks. Rising groundwater seeps into the walls, weakening them. Tourism brings both attention and risk. Preservation is a race against time, as the Mound of the Dead faces the danger of becoming the Mound of the Forgotten once more. But Mohenjo-Daro refuses to vanish quietly. It remains a touchstone in our understanding of what early human societies could achieve. Long before Rome engineered aqueducts, long before medieval Europe built sewer systems, the people of Mohenjo-Daro had already solved the challenge of urban sanitation. Long before central governments inscribed laws on stone, the Indus people organised cities that functioned with order and consistency. Their legacy is not written in grandiose monuments, but in bricks, drains, and the logic of planning, achievements that made daily life healthier and more livable. To stand among its ruins is to feel a paradox. Here was a civilization that reached astonishing heights of urban life, and yet it remains voiceless. We can reconstruct their streets but not their songs, their wells but not their prayers. We know them as engineers and city builders, but not as individuals. The script on their seals remains closed to us, and until it opens, the people of Mohenjo-Daro remain ghosts, and perhaps that is part of its power. Mohenjo-Daro reminds us that history is always incomplete, that greatness can be forgotten, and that silence sometimes says as much as words. Its bricks are mute, but their very order and endurance speak of a people who built a city not for kings, but for communities. A city where the common act of bathing, the simple act of draining water, was elevated into something sacred and enduring. As the sun sets on the Indus plain, the streets glow in red and orange light. the great bath reflecting the last of the sky. It is easy to imagine figures moving again through the ruins, filling them with life, voices and laughter. For though the city fell silent, the memory of Mohenjo-Daro continues, a reminder that civilization's first greatness sometimes lies not in monuments to power, but in the quiet genius of making life better for its people. The city of Teotihuacan. The valley north of Mexico City is broad, fertile, and ringed by mountains that glow golden at sunrise. It is here, on this plain, that one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world rises. Teotihuacan, a city so immense and so enigmatic that centuries later, the Aztecs believed gods themselves must have built it. To walk through its ruins today is to step into a silence heavy with lost voices, a place where the stones still whisper of a civilization that reached extraordinary heights and then vanished into obscurity. The first impression is scale. From afar, the Pyramid of the Sun dominates the landscape. Rising over 200 feet high, its base sprawls nearly 730 feet across each side, making it one of the largest structures of the pre-Columbian world. It is rivaled only by the Pyramid of the Moon, which looms at the northern end of the city's central boulevard, the Avenue of the Dead. Between them stretches a vast ceremonial core lined with temples, plazas, and platforms. Even in ruin, Teotihuacan conveys a sense of majesty, a geometry so precise and monumental that it seems beyond ordinary human hands. The city's name itself adds to the mystery. Teotihuacan is not what its builders called it. The word comes from the Aztecs, who discovered the ruins more than 600 years after its fall. In their language, Nahuatl, it means the place where the gods were created, or the place where men become gods. To them it was not just an abandoned city, but a sacred stage where cosmic events had unfolded. Yet the actual people who designed, built and lived in Teotihuacan remain nameless. Unlike the Maya, who left hieroglyphic inscriptions, or the Egyptians, who carved the names of their kings into stone, the builders of Teotihuacan left no written record. Archaeologists believe the city began to rise around 100 BCE, growing rapidly in the centuries that followed. By 200 CE, it was a sprawling metropolis covering more than 20 square kilometres, with a population estimated between 100,000 and 200,000 people. That would make it one of the largest cities in the world at the time, larger than most European cities of the same era, rivaling Rome and surpassing cities in China and the Middle East. What sets Teotihuacan apart is its planning. Unlike cities that grew organically over centuries, Teotihuacan appears deliberately designed from the outset. Its central axis, the Avenue of the Dead, runs straight for more than a mile, flanked by ceremonial platforms and residential compounds. The city is oriented about 15.5 degrees east of true north, a detail that scholars believe may connect to astronomical observations. Some have suggested the alignment corresponds to the setting of the Pleiades, or the sun's position on specific days of the year. If so, then the city was more than a place to live. It was a cosmic map inscribed in stone. The Pyramid of the Sun, the city's largest structure, was built in a single massive construction phase, an astonishing feat of labour and coordination. Its interior is mostly solid rubble, faced with cut stone and plaster that was once brightly painted. At its summit stood a temple, long since lost, where rituals would have been performed in sight of the entire valley. Beneath it, a cave was discovered, a natural lava tube altered into a chamber with 4 side rooms. Scholars believe it may have been a sacred space, perhaps linked to origin myths, for in Mesoamerican belief, caves were portals to the underworld and wombs of creation. The pyramid may have been built to sanctify and monumentalize this cave, turning natural space into cosmic architecture. At the northern end of the Avenue of the Dead stands the Pyramid of the Moon, smaller in height but no less significant. It aligns with Cerro Gordo, a mountain looming in the background, creating a visual link between man-made and natural sacred forms. Excavations beneath the pyramid have revealed offerings of obsidian blades, greenstone figurines, animals, and even human sacrifices, testaments to the rituals that animated the city's life. From its summit, priests and rulers may have presided over ceremonies that involved thousands of participants, with the mountain as a backdrop to human drama. Closer to the centre lies the Ciudadela, a vast plaza complex large enough to hold tens of thousands of people. At its heart is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, sometimes called the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, adorned with intricate stone carvings of feathered serpents and reptilian masks. Excavations here revealed mass burials, rows of bound men sacrificed as part of the temple's dedication. These discoveries reveal a society where grandeur and violence intertwined, where monumental beauty was consecrated with blood. And yet Teotihuacan was more than temples and pyramids. Surrounding the ceremonial core were residential compounds that housed the majority of its population. These were not flimsy huts, but carefully built apartment complexes, some capable of holding dozens of families. Many were decorated with vibrant murals depicting gods, animals, and abstract patterns. Scenes of jaguars, birds, water, and fire suggest a symbolic world rich in cosmology. The presence of household shrines indicates that religious practice was woven into daily life, not confined to the great temples. Economically, Teotihuacan thrived on trade and industry. Its location gave it access to obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for making blades, tools, and weapons. Workshops have been found where artisans shaped obsidian into spear points and knives, products that were exported across Mesoamerica. Pottery, textiles, and jewellery were also crafted in abundance. In return, Teotihuacan imported luxury goods, jade from Guatemala, shells from the coasts, cacao from the tropics. Archaeological finds show its influence extended as far as the Maya world. At sites like Tikal in Guatemala, Teotihuacan-style imagery and weapons appear, hinting at military or political interventions. But despite its size and power, Teotihuacan is remarkable for its absence of rulers. Nowhere in the city are there statues or inscriptions glorifying kings. Unlike the Maya, who carved dynastic histories, or the Egyptians, who immortalized pharaohs, Teotihuacan left no named leaders. This has led to competing theories. Some suggest the city was ruled by a collective elite, priests, warriors, and administrators sharing power in a council-like system. Others believe rulers existed but chose not to emphasize personal identity, instead presenting themselves as embodiments of cosmic order. The murals, which often depict gods rather than humans, may reflect this focus on divine rather than individual authority. The daily life of Teotihuacan's people must have been vibrant. Imagine walking down the Avenue of the Dead at its height. Vendors call out in bustling marketplaces, selling obsidian blades, maize, beans, and chili peppers. Children play in courtyards, their laughter echoing against painted walls. Priests in elaborate costumes process toward the pyramids, accompanied by drums and flutes. Artisans hammer away in workshops, shaping obsidian into razor-sharp edges. Smoke rises from kitchens where tortillas bake on clay griddles. At night the city glows with fires, and the pyramids loom as dark silhouettes under a sky crowded with stars. Teotihuacan must have been a cosmopolitan hub. Archaeological evidence suggests neighbourhoods were divided by ethnicity. Compounds of people from Oaxaca, the Gulf Coast, and even distant Maya lands have been identified. This mix of cultures reflects the city's magnetism. It was not only a local centre, but a regional capital drawing people from across Mesoamerica. And yet, despite this richness, Teotihuacan fell. Around 550 CE, the city's ceremonial core was burned, temples destroyed, statues smashed, murals defaced. The fire was deliberate, suggesting uprising or civil war. By the 7th century, Teotihuacan was largely abandoned, its population dispersed. The reasons remain unclear. Climate change, famine, overpopulation, internal revolt, or foreign invasion have all been proposed. Perhaps it was a combination. A society stretched too far, its cosmic order unravelling. When the Aztecs arrived centuries later, they found a ghost city. They named it Teotihuacan and wove it into their mythology as the place where the gods created the fifth sun, the current era of the world. To them, the ruins were sacred, not human, and in a way they were right. The scale and silence of Teotihuacan transcend ordinary human ambition. Part 1 closes with this image. Standing on the Avenue of the Dead at twilight, the Pyramid of the Sun casting its shadow across the valley. Around you lies a city without a known name for its people, without kings or inscriptions, but filled with the echoes of rituals, trade, and life. In Part 2 we will explore the city's symbolic meanings, its role in Mesoamerican cosmology, the significance of its murals, and the enduring mystery of why it fell. The ruins of Teotihuacan speak in stone, but their meaning remains elusive. We see the immense pyramids, the avenue aligned with celestial events, the murals alive with colour and symbols, yet the voices of the people who lived here remain absent. In Part 1, we explored the city as it rose and thrived, its scale, planning and daily life. Now, we turn to the deeper mysteries. What did Teotihuacan mean to its builders? What role did its art and cosmology play? And why, after centuries of prosperity, did the city of the gods fall into silence? To begin, one must stand again at the Avenue of the Dead, the central axis of the city. Archaeologists note that it was not built simply as a grand boulevard. Its orientation, offset 15.5 degrees east of north, aligns with astronomical events, possibly the setting of the Pleiades star cluster, or the sun's position on certain days of the year. Such alignments suggest the city was designed as a cosmic calendar, a physical embodiment of time and order. Every step taken along the avenue may have symbolized a journey through the cosmos, connecting human ritual with celestial cycles. The pyramids themselves were not merely monuments but cosmic mountains. In Mesoamerican belief, mountains were sacred, places where gods dwelt and from which water and fertility flowed. By constructing artificial mountains in the form of pyramids, the people of Teotihuacan created sacred landscapes in stone. The Pyramid of the Sun, with its cave beneath, may have represented the womb of creation, where the first humans or gods emerged. The Pyramid of the Moon, aligned with Cerro Gordo, linked human construction with natural topography, binding earth and sky together. The murals of Teotihuacan add further layers of meaning. Though faded now, enough remain to give glimpses into the city's symbolic world. In the Tepantitla compound, murals depict a goddess figure, sometimes called the Great Goddess of Teotihuacan. She wears a bird headdress, out of which flows water and vegetation. Surrounding her are streams filled with fish, birds, and butterflies, while below, people dance, play music, and gather flowers. This image suggests a fertility deity, a goddess of life and abundance central to the city's worldview. Yet alongside life, there is also death. Other murals show jaguars blowing conch shells, warriors adorned with headdresses and abstract symbols of fire and water. Teotihuacan seems to have woven together themes of fertility, warfare, and cosmic order. Unlike the Maya, whose art often focused on kings, Teotihuacan's murals emphasize collective symbols and deities. The city seems less concerned with glorifying individuals and more with representing the larger forces of the universe. One striking feature is the absence of writing. The Maya carved long hieroglyphic inscriptions on stelae and temples, recording dynasties and events. Teotihuacan, by contrast, used only short glyphic symbols whose meanings are still debated. Was this an intentional choice, a culture that rejected personal history in favour of collective myth? Or have we simply failed to find their full system of writing? Whatever the answer, the result is that Teotihuacan speaks through symbols rather than words, leaving us to interpret without direct guidance. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent adds another dimension. Its facade is covered with alternating feathered serpent heads and other reptilian figures, often identified as the fire serpent or Tlaloc, the storm god. Beneath its foundations were found over 200 burials, many of them bound and sacrificed. Some were warriors, buried with weapons and ornaments, while others were adorned with jewellery or tools. These offerings suggest that the temple was consecrated with ritual bloodshed, a cosmic bargain in which human life was exchanged for divine favour. This blending of grandeur and sacrifice reflects a worldview where the cosmos was not stable, but had to be maintained through ritual. For the people of Teotihuacan, building pyramids and offering sacrifices were not mere acts of devotion, they were acts of survival, ensuring that the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and life would continue. But if the city embodied cosmic order, what happens when that order falters? By the 5th century CE, Teotihuacan had reached its height. Its influence stretched across Mesoamerica, with evidence of Teotihuacan-style architecture and goods in places as far as the Maya city of Tikal. Its markets thrived, its temples gleamed with paint, its priests presided over rituals that bound community and cosmos. And then, within a century it unravelled. Around 550 CE, something catastrophic occurred. The ceremonial core of the city was burned, temples, palaces, and elite residences reduced to ash. Murals were deliberately destroyed, statues smashed and symbols of authority defaced. Archaeologists see this not as an accident but as a targeted act of destruction, perhaps an uprising by the city's population against its ruling elite. For centuries, ordinary people may have lived under the burden of tribute, labour and sacrifice demanded by the city's leaders. When conditions worsened, through drought, famine or political tension, rebellion may have erupted. Climate may have played a role. Studies of lake sediments suggest periods of drought in central Mexico around the 6th century. A city as large as Teotihuacan, dependent on agriculture, would have been vulnerable to crop failures. Hungry populations, burdened by demands for ritual offerings, may have turned against their leaders. In this light, the burning of temples was not just political but symbolic, a rejection of the cosmic order that had failed them. After the fires, Teotihuacan never recovered. Its population declined, its buildings fell into disrepair, and its influence waned. By the 7th century, it was largely abandoned. For centuries it lay silent, its pyramids looming over fields and villages, its murals fading in the sun. When the Aztecs arrived around the 14th century, they were so awed that they integrated the ruins into their mythology. They believed that at Teotihuacan, the gods had gathered to create the current sun and moon, that this was the birthplace of the cosmos itself. And in a sense, the Aztecs were right. Teotihuacan is not just a ruin, but a cosmic symbol, a place where humanity sought to bridge earth and sky. Its pyramids are mountains of meaning, its murals rivers of myth, its silence a reminder that even the greatest cities can fall. Today, as you stand atop the Pyramid of the Sun and look across the valley, the scale of Teotihuacan still overwhelms. The Avenue of the Dead stretches before you. The Pyramid of the Moon anchors the horizon, and beyond them rise the mountains. It is easy to see why the Aztecs believed gods walked here. And yet, what lingers most is not divine presence, but human achievement. The labour of thousands who carried stones, painted walls, carved serpents, and lived their lives in apartments now turned to dust. Teotihuacan remains an enigma. Who ruled it? Why did they hide their names? What caused its fiery collapse? These questions remain unanswered, and perhaps they always will. But in its mystery lies its power. The city of the gods was also a city of people, and its ruins remind us that human greatness, no matter how monumental, is fragile. The Roman concrete. The ruins of the Roman Empire stretch across Europe, the Middle East and North Africa. Aqueducts cutting across hillsides, amphitheatres standing in silent grandeur, harbours that once buzzed with trade, and massive domes that still seem to float against gravity itself. What unites so many of these structures is not just their design or their scale, but the material that holds them together. Roman concrete, known in Latin as opus caementicium. At first glance, concrete may not seem worthy of awe. Today it is everywhere. Sidewalks, parking garages, bridges, skyscrapers. We treat it as a background material, ubiquitous and unremarkable. And yet the concrete of ancient Rome is not like ours. It is older, rougher, and often made without steel reinforcement. And yet, paradoxically, it has endured thousands of years while modern concrete, under similar exposure to sea, rain, and air, often begins to crumble within just a few decades. The Romans discovered a formula that not only lasted but, in some cases, became stronger over time. To understand why Roman concrete is such a mystery, you must begin with its survivors. Take the Colosseum in Rome, completed in 80 CE. Its outer walls, despite centuries of earthquakes, invasions and stone scavenging, still stand in defiance of time. Or the Pantheon, completed under Emperor Hadrian around 126 CE. Its dome, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, spans 142 feet across, a perfect circle of stone that seems to defy gravity. Nearly 2,000 years later, it remains intact, still a functioning building, still inspiring architects and engineers. Perhaps most astonishing are the Roman seawalls and harbours. At places like Kossa in Italy or Caesarea in Israel, Roman engineers poured concrete directly into seawater to create docks, breakwaters, and piers. To modernise, this seems reckless. Seawater corrodes steel, dissolves salts, and eats away at modern concrete. And yet Roman marine concrete has endured for nearly 2,000 years, in some cases growing stronger, as if the ocean itself conspired to preserve it. So what was their secret? The Romans themselves were not silent on the matter. The architect and engineer Vitruvius, writing in the 1st century BCE, describes the materials of Roman concrete in his treatise De Architectura. He emphasizes the importance of pozzolana, a volcanic ash found near Naples and other regions of Italy. When mixed with lime and rubble, this ash produced a mortar that hardened not just in air but under water. The Romans recognized the special qualities of volcanic ash, and they exploited it with systematic genius. Their typical recipe blended lime, calcium oxide produced by heating limestone, volcanic ash, and pieces of stone or brick. When combined with water, a chemical reaction took place. The lime interacted with the ash to form new minerals that bound the mixture together. Unlike modern Portland cement, which forms relatively uniform crystals that can crack under stress, Roman concrete formed a more complex microstructure. This complexity seems to have given it resilience, allowing it to adapt rather than fail when stressed. Recent scientific studies have revealed even more astonishing details. When researchers examined Roman harbour concrete under a microscope, they found a luminous tobermorite, a rare mineral that forms under high heat. Yet here it had formed at ambient temperatures, catalysed by the seawater itself. In other words, Roman concrete was not inert, it was reactive. When seawater seeped into cracks, it triggered new chemical reactions, creating fresh minerals that actually healed the cracks. Where modern concrete is vulnerable to water, Roman concrete was alive to it, turning exposure into reinforcement. This discovery changes the way we think about Roman engineering. They were not merely building with stone and mortar, they were harnessing chemistry in ways that even modern engineers are still struggling to replicate. Their material science was practical, empirical, and astonishingly effective. But the story's not just one of formulas and minerals. Roman concrete was part of a broader engineering revolution that reshaped the ancient world. Before Rome, monumental stone architecture required cutting, transporting, and precisely fitting huge blocks of stone. The Egyptians raised pyramids from millions of limestone blocks. The Greeks built temples from carefully hewn marble. Rome, by contrast, could pour its monuments. Concrete freed builders from the limits of quarried stone. Walls could be curved, domes could be cast, and massive spaces could be enclosed without forests of columns. Concrete was cheap, flexible, and strong. This material enabled the empire's infrastructure. Aqueducts carried water across miles of countryside, their arches standing firm on concrete foundations. Roads spanned continents, their layers cemented by lime and ash. Amphitheatres rose in cities across the empire, offering grand stages for public life. Bathhouses, basilicas, bridges, and palaces all relied on the miracle material. Roman concrete became the skeleton of empire, holding together its urban life, its commerce, its power. And yet, even as we admire Roman concrete, we face a paradox. We know its broad recipe, but we cannot fully replicate its durability. Modern concrete, based on Portland cement, dominates our world because it sets quickly, is relatively cheap, and works well with steel reinforcement. But it is also vulnerable. Salt water corrodes the steel inside, expanding and cracking the structure. Chemical reactions within the cement itself can weaken it over time. Where Roman concrete grows stronger with exposure, ours weakens. This paradox raises tantalizing questions. Did the Romans understand the self-healing properties of their concrete, or was it an accidental discovery? Did they deliberately choose volcanic ash with specific mineral content, or was it simply local material that happened to have miraculous properties? Was there a lost ingredient or technique, something not recorded by Vitruvius, something that vanished when the empire fell? Adding to the mystery is the decline of the knowledge. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the art of Roman concrete largely disappeared in Europe. Medieval builders returned to stone and lime mortar, raising cathedrals and castles without the sweeping concrete domes of Rome. It was not until the 18th and 19th centuries that concrete re-emerged in modern form, rediscovered through industrial chemistry. By then, the knowledge of Roman self-healing concrete was long forgotten. To walk among the ruins today is to confront this mystery directly. Stand beneath the dome of the Pantheon, where light streams through the oculus, illuminating the coffered ceiling. Consider that this dome has stood for nearly 2 millennia, unreinforced, its concrete still holding. Contrast that with modern stadiums and highways, built less than a century ago, already crumbling, patched, or demolished. How did the ancients achieve such permanence when we, with our machines and science, so often fail? The answer perhaps lies not only in chemistry but in philosophy. The Romans built for eternity. Their empire was imagined as eternal, their monuments as legacies that would stand forever. They chose durability over speed, resilience over convenience. Modern society often chooses the opposite, building quickly, cheaply, for immediate use rather than long-term endurance. Roman concrete is not just a material but a symbol of a worldview, one where infrastructure was meant to outlast generations. When archaeologists first began to examine Roman ruins in detail, they noticed something peculiar. Structures exposed to seawater, piers, seawalls, and breakwaters were not crumbling, as one might expect, but often looked stronger than inland concrete. Instead of dissolving under centuries of pounding waves, these structures seemed to grow denser, their cracks filled with new minerals. This was the first hint that Roman concrete was not a static material, but a living system, one that interacted with its environment in ways modern engineers had not imagined. For decades, the formula for Roman concrete was known only in broad strokes: lime, volcanic ash, and rubble. But it was not until the late 20th and early 21st centuries that scientists began to peer into its microscopic structure. With tools like scanning electron microscopes and X-ray diffraction, researchers uncovered what the Romans themselves could not have seen: a microcosm of crystals, minerals, and reactions that explained the material's resilience. At the heart of the mystery lies a mineral called aluminous tobermorite. Rare in nature, it typically forms only under extreme heat, such as in volcanic environments. Yet in Roman marine concrete, aluminous tobermorite formed spontaneously, triggered by the interaction of seawater with volcanic ash. This was astonishing. Modern concrete exposed to seawater usually weakens. Salt infiltrates, steel reinforcement corrodes, cracks spread. But Roman concrete used seawater as an ally. As water seeped into its pores, it dissolved some components of the ash and lime, which then recrystallized into durable, interlocking minerals. Instead of breaking apart, the concrete healed itself. This discovery reframed Roman concrete as not merely durable, but adaptive. It was a material designed, whether by accident or insight, to improve with age. In a way, Roman concrete was alive, its chemistry dynamic rather than inert. Every wave that struck a Roman harbour wall did not destroy it, but helped reinforce it. The key ingredient was pozzolana, the volcanic ash sourced from areas like Pozzuoli near Naples, or along the Bay of Naples where Vesuvius loomed over the landscape. This ash contained a rich mixture of silica and alumina, essential for the pozzolanic reaction with lime. The Romans understood empirically which ashes worked best. They shipped thousands of tons across the empire, preferring Italian ash even for distant projects. The widespread distribution of this material shows how vital it was to their engineering. Modern scientists have tried to replicate Roman concrete with some success. By mixing lime, volcanic ash and seawater, researchers have managed to produce concrete that grows aluminous tobermorite crystals over time. Yet the exact proportions, conditions, and long-term behaviours remain elusive. It seems the Romans developed not one formula but many, adapted to different needs: walls, domes, piers, aqueducts. Their knowledge was not a single secret recipe, but a tradition of experimentation, refined over centuries of building. One of the most intriguing aspects is the way the Romans used lime clasts, small chunks of quicklime that were only partially slaked. Modern concrete aims for uniformity. Roman concrete embraced heterogeneity. These lime clasts, scattered through the mixture, may have been crucial to the self-healing properties. When cracks formed, water dissolved these clasts, triggering fresh reactions that sealed the fracture with new minerals. What modern engineers once dismissed as poor mixing may, in fact, have been a deliberate feature of Roman craftsmanship. The implications of rediscovering Roman concrete are profound. Today, our civilization relies on Portland cement, developed in the 19th century, which is cheap and versatile but environmentally costly. Producing Portland cement accounts for nearly 8% of global carbon dioxide emissions, as limestone is heated to high temperatures to make clinker. It also produces concrete that, while strong initially, degrades within 50 to 100 years, especially in marine environments. Bridges, highways, and skyscrapers must be repaired or replaced constantly. draining resources. Roman concrete offers a tantalizing alternative. If we can replicate its self-healing properties, we could build seawalls that last centuries, infrastructure that grows stronger rather than weaker, and cities more resilient to climate change. Already, some research groups are experimenting with volcanic ash blends and lime-based concretes, hoping to reduce carbon emissions and extend durability. Imagine coastal cities protected by harbour walls that do not crumble in decades but endure for millennia, like those of Rome. But the mystery of Roman concrete is not only technical, it is cultural. Why did this knowledge vanish after Rome's fall? Some scholars argue that the empire's collapse disrupted supply lines for volcanic ash, and without it, the formula could not be replicated. Others suggest that the skill of mixing and proportioning passed down through craft traditions was lost when large-scale construction ceased. In medieval Europe, stone masonry dominated, lime mortars were used, but the vast domes and harbours of Rome were no longer attempted. Concrete faded into obscurity until its reinvention in the modern age. This loss raises a haunting question. How much knowledge from the ancient world has been forgotten? Roman concrete is one example, but might there be other materials, techniques, or sciences buried in ruins and manuscripts? The rediscovery of Roman concrete is not just a story of chemistry, but a reminder of how fragile knowledge can be, how entire traditions can vanish with the fall of cities, leaving only ruins as clues. Consider again the Pantheon, its dome spanning 142 feet without reinforcement. Modern engineers still marvel at it, for even with steel and advanced calculations, such a structure would challenge today's builders. The secret lies in the gradation of materials. The Romans made the concrete lighter as it rose, mixing heavier basalt in the lower layers and pumice, a porous volcanic rock, near the top. The result was a dome both strong and light, a marvel of both science and artistry. That it still stands nearly 2 millennia later, while modern stadiums collapse after mere decades, is a humbling lesson. Walking through Rome or across the empire, one encounters countless examples. Bridges in Spain still span rivers, aqueducts still carry water in France, amphitheatres in North Africa still host performances. In every case, Roman concrete is the silent partner, holding the stones together, enduring rain, wind, and time. In the modern world, engineers and scientists are now treating Roman concrete not as an ancient curiosity, but as a guide for the future. Some suggest hybrid approaches, blending modern cements with volcanic ash to reduce emissions and extend durability. Others propose new lime-based concretes modelled directly on Roman formulas. If successful, the future of construction may look more like the past. Cities built not to last decades, but centuries, and yet there remains a sense of awe, even mystery. Did the Romans truly understand the full genius of what they had created? Or was it, as some suggest, partly a fortunate accident of local geology, the right ash in the right place at the right time? Vitruvius praised pozzolana, but nowhere does he describe the self-healing minerals we see today under microscopes. Perhaps the Romans knew their concrete endured but did not know why. Or perhaps they knew more than we assume, their knowledge lost not in ignorance but in the silences of history. Part 2 leaves us in the laboratories of the present, where scientists peer through microscopes at shards of Roman harbour walls, amazed at their crystal structures. It leaves us in construction sites of the future, where builders may one day pour a new kind of concrete inspired by Rome, not only reducing emissions but creating structures that truly endure. And it leaves us among the ruins of the past, where Roman arches and domes remind us that human ingenuity, once lost, can sometimes be found again, offering lessons for ages yet to come. Roman concrete is more than a material. It is a metaphor for resilience, for endurance, for the ability to heal rather than break. The empire that built it may have fallen, but its walls remain, whispering a message across millennia, built not for the moment, but for eternity.